Next, we're going to have another really great session coming up. And so I'll get Patricia McGuire on here. And here she comes. All right. And okay. I've got Patricia's, I think she's ready to go.
I'm ready to go when you are, yep.
All right, excellent. Okay, and again, as usual, if you have questions, please send them to the chat, and we'll be all set for that. And I'll have that set in just a second. I'll come back and set that in a minute. And so this is a presentation. It's going to be a real treat as well. The title of this presentation is the Haiku Pea Podcast Live, and virtual walk through the secret valley of the Elves. And so this is going to be a really treat. Patricia McGuire is the host of the Haiku Pea Podcast and editor of the Poetry Pea Journal of Haiku and Senryu. She writes using the pen name Bisshie, and she's born in the UK and now lives in Zürich, Switzerland. Her work has appeared in Autumn Moon Haiku Journal, Frogpond, Bones, Presence, Akitsu Quarterly, Blithe Spirit, Chrysanthemum, Sonic Boom, Failed Haiku, Prune Juice, The Heron's Nest, Wales Haiku Journal, in the Poetry Pea Journal of Haiku and Senryu. So without further ado, here is Patricia McGuire.
Thanks, Randy. Hello, and welcome to this special edition of the Haiku Pea Podcast with me, Patricia McGuire, from my podcast studio in Zürich in Switzerland. Many people wonder where I'm from, so let me tell you straight off the bat, I'm London Irish, but also Swiss. I don't know if that's more confusing or less confusing, but never mind. My thanks to Jay Friedenberg for allowing me this opportunity to talk to you, and to Randy not just for the thoughtfulness of his short introduction, but for the time he's taken to work with me on the run-up to today. And of course to Ignatius, who's not only helped me, and I'm sure the other presenters, but I'm sure has put in many hours of work to make this a success. So, ich begrüße Sie sehr herzlich. Welcome and thank you for joining me today. In this presentation, I'll give you a very brief history of the podcast. I'll talk a little bit about inspiration, and then we'll head off for a virtual walk in the secret valley of the Elves, during which I'm going to read you some prose, some haiku, some poetry, and then I'm sure we're going to have time for a chat and maybe even some workshopping of haiku at the end. But let's see how it goes. I'm going to show you some slides, and in between I'm going to take little breaks. So if you've got a burning question and Randy thinks we have the time, I'm sure he'll let me know. But don't worry, we can always come to questions at the end. So following our walk together, I hope you're going to be inspired to write some haiku and senryu, and I'll invite you to submit your work to me by email by the 31st of July this year. And hopefully it will appear in the autumn edition of the Poetry Pea Journal of Haiku and Senryu. Don't worry, I'll remind you at the end how to do it. Now, Randy and I are going to try and use some polls today. They may work, they may not, but let's have a go and see if they do. So I was wondering, how many of you have listened to the Haiku Pea podcast before? It's a moment of truth. Time for the first poll. Now, you can be totally honest. If you haven't listened before, it's not a problem. The way I see it, it'll be a splendid opportunity to win over some new listeners. And I'm going to do my best. I hope you'll all become regulars to the community, and also listeners and contributors. I don't know if we have the results yet, but I'll keep going. It doesn't really matter whether you're regulars or new listeners. Everyone's welcome here. Is this a podcast? Well, oh, wow, I've just seen the results of the poll. Welcome to a lot of new people. So, thanks, Randy. Is this a podcast? Well, my dear husband says not, on the basis that you can see me, at least I hope you can. But I'm approaching it as though it were one, and I hope that Randy's able to record it, see the record button going, and you can visit with me again, and I can release it maybe as a podcast in the future and put it on YouTube. But you've got a head start on everybody else. Perhaps you'd wonder how the podcast started. Well, it was born out of illness and ignorance. 3 years ago, I found myself at home after having spent a week as an emergency patient in hospital. I was digesting some unpleasant news, probably not life-threatening, if all went well, and wondering what I could do with myself because I wasn't able to go back to work. I wanted to do something creative, and I was interested in poetry and alighted on the idea of haiku, but knew very little about it, except that it was 3 lines and the format was 575, right? Anyway, I was already a podcaster. I've got a podcast related to my profession, and I thought it would be fun to podcast haiku. And my first efforts are truly terrible. They're still available, and I leave them there to remind myself how much more I know now than I did then. And if you search them out, I hope you'll agree that my work is a lot better than it was then. But if you don't, please don't burst my bubble. In the 3 years since this podcast started, it's taken on a new life. There are 2 podcasts a month. The first is a little bit of education. The second, a reading of work submitted by my listeners on a particular topic. The next topic, if you're interested in submitting, is joy, and the deadline is the 1st of August. And you'll find other topics on the website. And you know, so many wonderful poets have joined me along the way that this year, the Poetry Pea Journal of Haiku and Senryu was launched. This month, the 2nd edition is out, and if you'd like more information about that, you can find it on the Poetry Pea website. But you'll hear about it first if you're signed up to my mailings. There's also a Poetry Pea YouTube channel where you can listen to the podcast, and additionally, you'll find PTV Moments. Twice a week, I publish a video and its accompanying haiku, which the community sent to me. And again, more of that on the website. There are more projects planned and opportunities to participate, like guest editing submissions or being a community judge for a topic for the journal, doing readings of your work on the podcast. And I hope those many of you who are not yet part of the community will get involved. You'll virtually meet a really considerate and altruistic group of people. And you can find out more, yes, on the website, or sign up for mailings. I don't bombard you, promise. Or you can just email me. Like Mike Railing said, email's very easy. So now I'd like to turn to inspiration. So, last Monday on the podcast, Craig Kidner told us that paying close attention to the weather often generates haiku in his mind. And here's one of his that I particularly enjoyed, published in Bottle Rockets in 2019. Raindrops becoming the sound of rain. And Ronald Toby, who read for the podcast in episode 11 of the 3rd series, is inspired by the pleasure of living in beautiful mountain country. Wisps of deer scent rise. Farm dog barks at first sunlight. Bare fields, golden brome. And next month, Roger Watson is reading on the podcast, and he is often inspired by his travels. Sakura blossom on the koi pond. 2 legends meet. Personally, I get inspired by getting out and about in nature, but also reading the work of other people, whether prose or poetry, and of course I include haiku in the poetry category. For example, I was reading Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet, and I came up with, "What light through yonder window breaks? Envious moon." Well, today I'm hoping to put all my favourite inspirations into one basket as we take a walk together. Now, Jay suggested that I call our walk a ginkgo, but I wasn't too sure, so we're going to have another poll, please, Randy. I want to find out how many of you have actually been on a ginkgo.
Okay, I'm having a little trouble finding the second poll.
Not to worry. If it comes up, it comes up. We'll carry on.
All right. I don't see the second poll, so
don't worry. It's not a problem. Anyway, so just so you know, I've never been on one before. So I prefer to say that we're just going on a virtual walk. We'll see photos and hear pieces of work, which I hope will inspire you to write astounding haiku, or even. And you can send them to me for inclusion in the Autumn Journal. Oh, we found it.
I found it. So here we go.
Thanks, Randy. I was reading an essay by Jim Ketchian recently called Soba. He really wasn't terribly complimentary about ginkgo. So we're not going to let that deter us, but he did write that the rationale of the ginkgo is that the poet, brought face to face with the raw workings of nature, will be inspired to the sublimity of art. And I hope that's what's going to happen to us today. Fingers crossed. Oh, no pressure then. Mine might be a little bit different to what you're used to, but let's go for a walk anyway. And our walk's going to take us in the same direction as Frodo in The Fellowship of the Ring by Tolkien. So, Randy, can you find number 3?
I can.
Which asks, how many of you have read Tolkien's books? I know it's not everybody's cup of tea. My husband really doesn't like them. And as for the films, well, he slept through the first one, and so we didn't invite him to join us for the rest of them. But for those of you who haven't read the work or seen the films, please don't worry. Just take in the scenery, listen to the readings, and jot down some ideas for future haiku. We'll take a couple of short breaks maybe when you can ask some questions, but that's really up to Randy. And then at the end, we'll chat, maybe share some work. Oh, quite a few people are familiar with Tolkien. Good. So I'm going to turn my video off and I'm going to start sharing the screen. Okay, I hope you can all see that.
I think we can.
Good. So let's strap on our hiking boots and go for a walk through one of the places I most love in the world, the secret valley of the Elves, otherwise known as the Lauterbrunnen Valley in the heart of Switzerland. So this is the Lauterbrunnen Valley, Lauterbrunnen to the locals, and Rivendell to fans of Tolkien's Lord of the Rings. Today we're going to walk from the far end along the valley and then up over the mountain on the right-hand side. It's an area which has inspired many creatives in its time. The 19-year-old Tolkien holidayed here in 1911, and if you look at some of his illustrations and you know the valley, you'll see that Lauterbrunnen is undoubtedly Rivendell. But Goethe and Mendelssohn were also inspired to create great works here, and in more modern history, you'll see parts of the valley featured in the James Bond film on Her Majesty's Secret Service, as well apparently as in a video game called Forza Motorsport. But as I said before, you don't need to know anything about any of those, the Tolkien, Goethe, Mendelssohn, nothing. We're just going to wander along the valley and see what comes to us. Having said that, if you do know Tolkien's works, then today I'd like to more or less follow the path that I believe Bilbo in The Hobbit and Frodo would have taken into Rivendell, and then, taking leave of the river elves, we'll hike up to the realm of the Woodland Elves. So, let's go. Here we are, high in the mountains in a place called Traxelloinen, a place so beautiful that it's part of a UNESCO World Heritage Site. The picture was taken in high summer and much of the snow has melted. And we'll start our descent into the valley from here with a reading from Yvonne Hardenbrook, published in Haiku in English, The First 100 Years. Mountain Hike. We drink from the beginning of a great river. The Lauterbrunnen Valley has 72 waterfalls. I always set out on my walk through the valley with the best intentions of counting them, but I always get so far and get distracted by something. And as yet, in all the years that I've been visiting, I probably haven't counted more than 20. Looking at this one, I thought of this haiku by Craig Kittner, which was published in Frogpond, Volume 42, Number 1. Finding a dozen paths down the mountain, yesterday's rain. Now I'd like to read you something from Tolkien's The Hobbit. Bilbo never forgot the way they slithered and slipped into the dusk down the steep zigzag path into the secret valley of Rivendell. They grew warmer as they got lower, and the smell of the pine trees made him drowsy. so that every now and again he nodded and nearly fell off, or bumped his nose on the pony's neck. Their spirits rose as they went down and down. The trees changed to beech and oak, and there was a comfortable feeling in the twilight. It smells like elves, thought Bilbo. Reading Tolkien's words, this haiku occurred to me. And please feel free to edit it. I'm not precious. It's an interesting exercise, actually, to look at someone else's haiku and see if you can write it differently. And I'm more than happy if you want to email me your thoughts or tell me at the end. So here it is. The rucksack gets heavier in the heat. Mountain descent. The rucksack gets heavier in the heat. Mountain descent. And I hope that someone reading it will take the time to wonder why. Why would the rucksack be getting heavier in the heat? In this case, I'm thinking that as I start my walk high in the mountains, I'm potentially wearing a jacket, a fleece, a t-shirt, long trousers which unzip to create shorts. And inevitably, as I move down the mountain, I'll become warmer and layers of clothes are going to be removed and bundled into the rucksack. As you walk around the mountains, you'll see plenty of creatures, from the insects enjoying the alpine meadows, the steinbock, which I've only ever seen high up in the mountains, and of course, those ubiquitous Swiss cows who live high in the meadows during the summer months. The tinkling of their bells is often the background to my walks. Cow country, the worn dirt track along the hillside. Jennifer Sutherland, from Chrysanthemum, issue 27, 2020. Looking at this, I thought I'd read you a verse from David J. Kelly in Blithe Spirit, volume 29, number 3. On our way down, a mountain stream joins the footpath. Now we're getting closer to the valley floor. We've walked through the high line of pine forest, and although we'll still walk through beech and oak and alder trees, we'll see more of the grasslands again. And this time, a little bit of Tolkien from the Fellowship of the Ring. The road was still running steadily downhill, and there was now in places much grass at either side, in which the hobbits walked when they could, to ease their tired feet. And I found this monoku, or should I now be saying one-line haiku. The balm of grass, tired feet. From the high valley of Traxaloinen, we reach the Weiss Lucine, a white river. It's white because the minerals contained within it are causing the colour, but what they are, I haven't got a clue. And apparently the name comes from the Celtic word, loikos or loika. The Celts were big in this area back in the day. There are two Lucine rivers, this white one and the black or the Schwarz Lucine. Then that one tumbles down into the Grindelwald Valley and they join together further down towards Interlaken. And it's said that there's a gentle rivalry between the occupants of these two river valleys. The villagers living on the white Lucine said the others were so dirty it turned the river black. And the villagers on the black Lucine say that the others never even washed, so the other tributary remained perfectly white. Now, I'm a resident of the White River area. I can tell you, at least in my case, that's not true. But whatever, this is always true. After the rain, the river, its weight. And that's by Norman Darlington, from Chrysanthemum, April 2020. It's at this point that I imagine Tolkien conceived the Ford of Rivendell. There's no other place which so matches his description. In this story, from Tolkien's The Fellowship of the Ring, Frodo, a hobbit, is heavily injured and being chased by the evil riders on their black horses. He and his horse have arrived at speed at the ford. Frodo heard the splash of water. It foamed about his feet. He felt the quick heave and surge as the horse left the river and struggled up the stony path. He was climbing the steep bank. He was across the ford. There came a roaring and rushing, a noise of loud water rolling many stones. Dimly Frodo saw the river below him rise, and down along its course there came a plumed cavalry of waves. White flames seemed to Frodo to flicker on their crests, and he half fancied that he saw amid the water white riders upon white horses with frothing manes. And from the previous reading, I divined this haiku. Loud water, cresting the waves, white horses. But if you prefer a seasonal clue, a kigo, maybe this one. Spring thaw, cresting the waves, white horses. So now we've come to the valley floor. It might be a time, Randy, I don't know if we've got a question that you'd like to ask, or should we carry on?
Carry on. I don't really have a question at this moment.
Jolly good. Okay. So now we've reached the valley floor. And according to Tolkien, Frodo missed the beautiful journey from the ford along the valley of the 72 waterfalls into the village. But you don't have to, because we're going to walk together along the floor and into the village. Walking with the river, the water does my thinking. Robert Baldwin, from Haiku in English, the First 100 Years. This river meanders along the White River. It's much darker, as you can see, and very clear and extremely cold. In the next set of slides, I'll show you some of the 72 waterfalls that you pass as you walk around the valley. And of course, I'll read you some haiku. The first is from Debbie Strange, from Mayfly number 65, summer 2018. Waterfall, we walk through the ghost of a rainbow. Waterfall, we walk through the ghost of a rainbow. Now, it's a shame you can't hear the falls, but trust me, the sound is absolutely deafening at times. And I thought this expressed it very well. It's from Minal Sharosh, from the Poetry Pea Journal of Haiku and Senryu, summer 2020. Hearing loss, my raised voice as deafening as the waterfall. This one is from Haiku, selected and edited by Peter Washington, a little something from Basho. A clear waterfall, into the ripples fall green pine needles. A clear waterfall, into the ripples fall green pine needles. A rainbow, in the mist of the waterfall, everything and nothing. Ian Turner, Blithe Spirit, Volume 29, Number 3. It's such a shame I couldn't photo any of the rainbows that you sometimes see in the waterfalls. Sorry about that. Now, the waterfalls are at their best around June and July, as the snow melts and feed the streams. This photo is from a little later in the year. It's by Valentina Rinaldi Adams from the Wales Haiku Journal, Spring 2019. Forest Trail, Summer Waning of the Waterfall. Forest Trail, Summer Waning of the Waterfall. We're about halfway to the village now, and I thought it would be a good time to have a look back where we've been. We've come from the far end, having walked down from near the peak of the mountains, through the pine woods, waded through small streams, and achieved the valley floor. And believe me, it was hard work on the knees. And often it was just as Shunto describes in this haiku from the Penguin Book of Haiku. Cascade sounds along a mountain path, the blistering heat. And this is the journey ahead of us. Perhaps you can just make out the buildings of the village in the distance. It's summer, I promise you, but the weather has turned, and now you can see why Tolkien called these mountains the Misty Mountains. And I've got something by Gary Hittmeyer from Chrysanthemum 2020 to read to you. Summer rain. The mountaintops vanish into swirling mist. On the outskirts of the village is the most famous of the waterfalls in the valley, the Staubach Falls. This one inspired Goethe to write his poem Gesang der Geister über den Wassern, or in English, Song of the Spirits over the Waters. I read some really terrible translations and thought, you know what, I can't do any worse, so this is my terrible translation of my favourite part. The pure stream flows from the high steep rocks, then beautifully scatters in cloud-like waves onto the smooth stone. And gently received, it continues, hidden, quietly murmuring, into the abyss. So in this photo, I've actually walked up a steep path behind the Staubach Falls, and we're looking through it, down onto the valley floor, down into Goethe's abyss. And this slide is just before we reach the village. So we're looking back again at the valley that we've walked. And I've just put it there because it's so beautiful. It makes me happy. So, at last we come to the village and the last homely house. The last homely house is the home of Tolkien's Lord Elrond. He, as my daughter would say, is a very big dog in the world of elves. I pass this house often, and it always makes me think of hobbits. I think it's the roof. So let's hear a little bit more from the fellowship. Frodo was now safe in the last homely house east of the sea. That house was, as Bilbo had long ago reported, a perfect house. Whether you like food or sleep or storytelling or singing or just sitting and sitting and thinking best, or a pleasant mixture of them all. Merely to be there was a cure for weariness, fear, and sadness, which expresses exactly how my husband and I feel about just being in the Lauterbrunnen Valley. So, in a minute, we're going to start our journey upwards. Randy, do we need to take anything at the moment?
Yes, we'll just take a slight pause here, and
okay.
If possible, people could send in a haiku if you've written one along. And we do have one already from Sari Grandstaff.
Mm-hmm.
And, Sari, would you like to share your haiku? I'll unmute you. There we go, I think. Oops.
Is that okay? Or
go ahead, Sari.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. Late spring, snow melt waterfall, already rushing.
Oh, lovely. Thank you very much indeed for that.
And thank you, Patricia. I'm enjoying this very much.
Thanks.
We also have one coming in by Agnes Savage. So Agnes.
Oh.
Hi. Hi, summer. The icy river we don't swim in.
Oh, do you know what? That's so true. The river, I wouldn't dare dip my toes in that river. That's brilliant.
But it hurts.
Yeah, I can imagine. Really wouldn't want to do that. So that was Hi Summer, the icy river we don't swim in. Was I right?
Mm-hmm, correct.
That's great. Thank you very much indeed. I'm so impressed that people have made something up already. Wow. Thank you.
Robert Whelan has a haiku as well.
Okay.
Okay, it goes, ascending with staccato effort, descending with flowing ease, footpath and waterfall.
Oh, that's great, but I didn't get a chance to write it down. So I hope the three of you are going to send these to me in an email. I'll put the details up later. That's lovely. Thank you so much. Thank you, Robert.
We have, I think, one or two more. Here's one from Deborah Kalaji.
Oh, Deborah, hi.
Hi, Patricia. Narrow view, the waterfall separating as it falls. Narrow view, the water separating as it falls.
As it falls. Lovely. Brilliant. Thank you very much.
And then Edward Cody Huddleston has one.
Mountain River, the flow of our small talk.
Oh, the flow of our small talk. Wow. Thank you very much. Actually, I'm familiar with your work. I think on Haiku Dialogue. Sometimes I've read it. I've really enjoyed reading your work. Thank you very much. Thank you all of you for that.
We have time for a couple more.
Of course we do. Why not? I have no idea what the time is. Yeah, go for it.
Piper has one for us.
Remembering the rucksack on the decline. Remembering the rucksack on the decline.
Great. I love it. I mean, I don't know what it. I can imagine that. I can imagine myself taking a break, and just forgetting about it, just getting distracted by everything, and just going for a walk and thinking, "Oh no, now I've got to go back and find it." That's wonderful. Thank you very much.
And here's one more from Janice Doppler.
Cleft in the valley draws me to the mist.
Oh.
Cleft in the valley draws me to the mist.
I'm so impressed. Thank you all very much. Definitely send these to me when you get a chance. I'll put the email up later. Thank you. Thanks, Randy. Are we going on, or are we?
Let's go to your next phase.
Okie dokie. Right, let's go for it. But again, I am in awe. Thank you very much. Okay, where am I? Yes. So off we go again. This time in the company of the Fellowship of the Ring. Frodo and the Fellowship are leaving Rivendell, and they're heading towards Mordor in the hope that they can destroy the ring, the one ring which rules them all. And if you don't know about this ring, just take it as read. It needs to be destroyed. And Tolkien writes, they crossed the bridge and wound slowly up the long steep paths that led out of the cloven vale of Rivendell. And I wrote this with a little bit of help from Tolkien. Actually, a lot of help from Tolkien. No laughter, no song or music. Summer's over. And the snow comes early to the valley. In September, one day can be like this, a nice, crisp, pleasant autumn day, but the next day on the mountains, snow will fall. And I read this by Gabriel Rosenstock in Haiku in English, and I just thought it was really appropriate. Green, 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 the pines, seconds before snow. So true. Frodo and the other members of the Fellowship of the Ring had to walk these steep hills. I've done it myself. It's very hard work. But these days, there's a cable car up to a place called Grutschalp, and in Tolkien's day, he could have taken a funicular. But I took the cable car and alighted at Grutschalp, from where I continued up the steep mountain track. And this photo was taken in June, a time when the alpine meadows are full of colour from wildflower and grasses. Dotted about the meadows, you'll find these little huts, or hutli, as they're known locally. Most of them are in use either as weekend retreats, or, as in this case, they house livestock and supplies, but obviously they can only be used when there isn't any snow. So although this one's not abandoned, I thought this haiku was quite apt. It's by Dennis Stukenbrücker from Blithe Spirit, Volume 30, Number 1. Abandoned farmhouse, wildflowers, right up to the door. And they were, right up to the door. And from the cable car, it's not too far to walk to the place I imagine inspired Tolkien to create the woodland realm of the Elves. This is the entrance to their woods. At least in my head it is. Woodland trail. A crow's caw pauses our conversation. That's by Michael Dillon Welsh from Blithe Spirit, Volume 29, Number 3, and it's part of a renge called Island Dialect. Woodland Trail. A crow's call pauses our conversation. Now, I love to visit castles, and last year I was in Malaga in Spain visiting Castillo Gibralfaro. It was a fascinating castle with very interesting entrances. People coming into the castle had to take a slightly twisting path, which would have given those defending the castle a definite advantage if those visitors had had evil intent. Walking along this woodland path, there are a number of obstacles like this one. They always remind me of a well-defended castle, and in this case, as you walk through the gap in the stone, the path twists. You can't see exactly what's behind it, and you could be walking into an ambush. In the woods, the wind is blowing gently through the trees. And if you stop, I swear you can often hear the whispering of the elves. In Tolkien's story, Frodo and his fellowship, which includes Legolas, the elf from Mirkwood, are deep in the territory of the Woodland Elves. There was a sound of soft laughter over their heads, and then another clear voice spoke in an elven tongue. Frodo could understand little of what was said, for the speech that the sylvan folk east of the mountains used among themselves was unlike that of the west. Legolas looked up and answered in the same language. "Who are they, and what did they say?" asked Merry. "They're elves," said Sam. "Can't you hear their voices?" "Yes, they are elves," said Legolas, "and they say that you breathe so loud that they could shoot you in the dark." Now, loud voices in the woods is not just a problem of the time of the elves. I don't know if you do a lot of hiking, but if you do, maybe you have the same problem as John McWhirter which he wrote about in Blithe Spirit, Volume 29, Number 1. Forest track. A man on his iPhone. I take the old path. The noise from other people's phones and their conversations are a constant problem, or at least they are to me. I often wonder, do they realize how much they're disturbing me? I think maybe I should compose a haiku or senryu that I can carry around with me and just hand it to them as our paths collide. And if you have a solution, perhaps, can you give it to me at the end of our walk? Anyway, maybe our iPhone man should do as Victor Ortiz did when he wrote this for Autumn Moon Haiku in 2020. Putting down my earbuds, a blackbird singing. You can see that we've walked through the mixed forest now, and we're in the higher part of the woodland because we're surrounded by pines. There's a little wooden bench at this point of the path where I usually take my lunch and enjoy the view, and it's a place that I feel closest to Tolkien. I wrote this here, which was published in Chrysanthemum, issue 27, 2020. Summer hike, deep in the mind of Tolkien, Woodland Elves. And, as we're walking in a country with a German dialect, I'll read their German translation from the same edition. Sommerwanderung, tief in Tolkiens Gedanken, Waldelfen. Anyway, we must go on, climbing higher into the mountains, and I'm afraid we're going to leave the woods. And to quote from Tolkien again, "Now is the time when those who wish to continue the quest must harden their hearts to leave this land." The world is about to open up, and we're going to see the sky again as we continue our hike, this time with Jane Reicholt from Haiku in English. Autumn. Taking a dirt road to the end. Now out above the tree line, we're going to continue our ascent, listening to the river at our side. And we'll hear from Ferris Gilly, first published in the Poetry Pea Journal of Haiku and Senryu in spring 2020. River Song. The moccasins glide into dark water. And now we can see our goal for today. Tonight we're going to stop under the protection of the mountains. But just for now, we have to continue climbing. We're not going to come across too many other travelers at this height, just a few fellow hikers or farmers out looking for their stock, like the elderly gentleman I came across last time I was up here. Here's a haiku from Srinivas S., also published in the Poetry Pea Journal of Haiku and Senryu, this time summer 2020, which describes my man perfectly. Mountain breeze, an old man at peace with his own pace. I love the P sounds in that. An old man at peace with his own pace. Anyway. Tucked into the mountainside, I found these little huts again. I think they're just perfect for folks like the hobbits to sleep in, don't you think? And it struck me looking at the photo, how green the environment is. Everywhere, the scent of green after rain, which was written by Dinah E. Cox in Full of Moonlight, the Haiku Society of America's 2016 member anthology. The Friends of the Fellowship of the Ring are making camp for the night by the lake, perhaps bedding down in the little huts we've just seen. Lake Water. On My Lips, the Mountains Song. By Cindy Lloyd in Presence 64. Lake Water. On My Lips, the Mountains Song. Do you know, I think we'd better leave them to it, because tomorrow they have to continue onwards towards Mordor. Their fellowship will be split apart, but all of them will have to cross the mountains to attain their goal, the destruction of the ring, which will save their world. Their predicament brought to mind this haiku by Thomas Powell in Shamrock Haiku Journal, issue 43. Darkness to light, a path through the bog leads to birdsong. And I hope Thomas will forgive me if I tweak it to fit my purpose today. Darkness to light, a path across the mountains leads to birdsong. And that's it. I'm sorry, we've finished. But I thank you very much for coming on this journey with me. And in case I don't have a chance later, I'd just like to say, I hope you'll join me again at Poetry Pea and take part in one or all of our various haiku-related projects. And don't forget, I know you're already inspired to write haiku and senryu related to the walk, so you can send me up to 10 verses via email, please. And your deadline is the 31st of July. If you can't note all this down, don't worry, it's been recorded, or you can go to the Poetry Pea website and find my contacts. But that's it for now. So I'm going to attempt to stop screen sharing and go back to you, Randy, and see what we've got to talk about next.
All right. Very good, Patricia. That was wonderful. Wonderful journey through the Valley of the Elves and wonderful ginkgo virtually today. And I know a lot of people did write a lot of haiku as they went along.
Yeah,
and
yeah, I was amazed.
yeah, that's wonderful. We could share those. You know, so questions, or there's a couple more haiku that have come in.
Great.
From Sari Grandstoff again. So let me just unmute Sari. And Sari, you can share your haiku.
Hello.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Patricia. iPhone turned off. I talked to the lily pads. Better reception.
Okay.
Thank you. Terrific. Love it. Thank you very much.
And Nikki Gutierrez has one as well. I've unmuted Nikki.
Hello.
Hi, Nikki.
The frozen river, the cracking of smiles.
Nice one. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And I think that's all we have at the moment. Did you want to do your fourth? Oh, here, I've got a question from Agnes Savage. So let me unmute Agnes.
Yeah, I just wanted to know, how often do you release a new Poetry Pea podcast? What's your schedule for the year?
Okay, well, I do 2 a month, and I hope I make it relatively easy by saying it's the first Monday of the month and the third Monday of the month. And the first one, like I said, I try and do a little bit of education stuff, really that I'm struggling with or that I've become interested in, and I sort of throw some ideas out to see what feedback I get. But also in that one, I've started taking readings by other poets, which is really nice. It adds a new dimension to the podcast. And we do Renku together. And I try and get enough of the Renku done so I can share a bit of it every time in that first Monday of the month. And then the third Monday of the month, I always do submissions from the submissions that people have sent me on the topics that I've set for the year. And you'll find the topics on the Poetry Pea website. So, and they're always normally, not for today, but normally the deadlines are the first of the month for that one. And unlike Mike, I'm pretty strict with my deadlines. Sorry. There you go.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We have another haiku from Saretta Martin.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Sarita Martin here.
Hello.
Leaning cottage, summer home to woodland elves. Leaning cottage, summer home to woodland elves.
Thank you. That's lovely. I can just see it in my landscape now. Thank you very much.
Okay. Are there any more questions or haiku that have come in today?
No. Then, Randy, if we have a moment, I'd be really interested in running that last poll, because it's a topic I want to cover at some point in the near future. I've run it past a few people already, and I'm getting some very different ideas. So, if we could go with that one, then.
Do contemporary English language haiku require Kigo? Everybody, please put your vote in.
Yeah, it'll give me a bit of guidance when I really start to put together the podcast about it. It's something I blow hot and cold on, so really interesting to see what you have to say about that. But I mean, there are lots of topics we're covering, so we're sort of not got to the end of brevity, but we're doing brevity at the moment, and I'll cover it in more detail at a later date, but we'll have a look at that.
Well, there's about 75%. We'll stop there and see. Here's the results.
Oh.
So we're about 67% to 33% on no versus yes on Kigo.
That's interesting. And having listened to Mike's talk about letting the rules go out the window. I'm Swiss. We like a rule, so it's very difficult for me sometimes to give up my rules. I've already given up on the 575 and many others. So I think that's where I'm going with the Kigo as well. But thank you very much for that. That's really good. Thank you. And the next one, actually, if you've got thoughts on the next on this topic, I'd really love to hear them. Like I said, we were just talking about brevity in the podcast, and I'd like to know, how long is too long for a haiku? I'm getting lots of feedback on that one. It's something I want to do in the not too distant future as well. So if you have any thoughts about that, please email me. It'd be much appreciated.
There's somebody who's sharing their screen. If they would. Okay, there we go. I got it off.
Okay.
Okay, excuse me. Did you want to repeat your question one more time, Patricia?
Yeah, hang on. So like I said, we're doing brevity. We've looked at what brevity means in a haiku, but a lot of people have asked me to swing that idea around and talk about how do you know it when a haiku is too long. And I've got a little bit of a handle on that one, but if anyone else would like to feed in ideas on that question, they'd be most appreciated. And of course, don't forget your deadline for the for this talk, for the haiku from this talk, is the 31st of July.
Okay.
And I'm a mean editor when it goes to timing. That's it. But I have to say, I was really very impressed with with all the work that was done already. Wow.
Bruce Pfeiffer would like to make a comment about the length, the brevity question. Bruce?
Oh.
If you have to breathe 2 or 3 times, it's too long.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I mean, I do the podcast because I love the spoken word, and haiku are great because you can usually get them out, can't you, within one breath. But really, that's how I know if a poem or a haiku or senryu is submitted. If it takes me more than one breath, maybe I might just go into 2, but more than that, and then I just can't. It's not workable, particularly when you're speaking it. It just doesn't work.
Deborah has something to say on this too.
Okay.
When I edit my haiku to figure out whether it's too long or too short, I look at each word, like what does it do to the haiku? Is it add additional meaning, or is it extraneous? And I think that's what happens with a 575, is that to make it 575, we add adjectives and stuff. And when 575 works, it's usually you're using very long words like oxygen or jacaranda or something like that. So that's kind of what I look at, is the word necessary or not?
Yeah, I have to totally agree with that one, the necessity of a word. But I think the problem is that so many of us came to haiku with the 575, or the knowledge of 575 being the only way to do haiku, and sometimes it's hard to break out of that. And I spend a lot of time as an editor trying to help people not break away from 575, because if you want to use it, that's perfectly fine, but maybe suggesting that if they want to think of another way of writing their work, that they can put the 575 in the cupboard for a little while. No.
Okay. Well, very good. And I thought we might end with a haiku from Bruce Feingold. Bruce, I'm going to unmute you, or perhaps you can unmute yourself. Okay, doesn't seem to be unmuting Bruce.
Oh, wait, hold on.
Oh, here he is.
Okay.
Start my video too.
So we'll wrap up the session with a haiku from Bruce and then a farewell from Patricia.
Thank you.
Alpine, this is a haiku I wrote a while ago. Alpine meadow swifts soaring in my knees.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you, Bruce. That's lovely. Send it to me. But also, just before we go then, Randy, if I could just say something and say thank you very much to you for looking after me today and for the work we did together beforehand. And to the other 2 presentations that have already been and gone, they put the fear, it really made me terrified of coming on here because they were just so good. Thank you very much to Charlotte and to Mike as well. Thank you,
Patricia. It was a wonderful presentation. We enjoyed it so much, and so I speak for so many people who are making comments that it's just a lovely journey here into the mountains with you, and so thank you, and best wishes to you and the Poetry and Haiku Podcast.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you.